Hi, Vermont. I'm in the Hall of Fame
So
today.
I'm assuming this is your first time in Norwich University.
It is, but it's quite an honor. I feel like I've been here many times before. I've been so welcomed by the president and others, wonderful cadets who have given me a short tour and explained to me that Norwich is all about the civilian and the military bridging. And I was very impressed. Honestly, I didn't know what to think before I came here because my TAC officer at West Point was from Norwich, and he was quite mean at times. So I also remember at Boise State, California, there was a Norwich student who came. I believe he was a senior, and that was one of the influences of my joining the military. He looked very disciplined, and so I figured that if I went to a military school or joined the military, that I would also become disciplined and find some structure. So I have a lot to thank Norwich for, and it's really great to be here.
Now, what's it like coming to a school like this now with your celebrity status, just celebrity status, but also the celebrity status with your issue with equality?
Well, particularly being in this state, Vermont, I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that our movement is in a moment of history of very serious proportions. I think what we need to recognize and acknowledge is that not everybody in the whole history of the world gets to live in a historic era for civil rights or for human progress, and I believe that we're privileged to be able to live in this time. I'm privileged to be gay. I am honored to be gay. It is a blessing to be able to fight for my own rights in a way that people of future generations will look upon jealously and enviously, that they weren't able to fight in the time when discrimination was most rampant. So, number one, that's what we must all remember. I don't consider myself a celebrity. I'm not a movie star. I don't get recognized when I'm walking the streets in major cities. And in that respect, I think that I'm grateful for not only my journey, but for where society has progressed. That anybody can, particularly in our democracy and in our way of government and our way of life in America, anybody can become an overnight activist that can make a difference in the world, not only for themselves, but for people beyond their time period on Earth. I think that our ability to do that is a testament to our democracy, and particularly when we talk to blogs or when we talk to smaller organizations or when we go to the local areas, we recognize that the work of activism is not as easy as it used to be, or what a lot of people figured that it used to be. That you can just go on TV in a national way and all of a sudden the law has changed. I beg to differ with that theory. I've been to hundreds of schools in the past 2 years. I had gone to the locations where many times I found a hostile audience, and I had found people that disagreed with my message of equality and fair treatment because of popularity contests, because they felt that gay people were not popular enough. I don't get that feeling here in Vermont, but it is important to go to all of the local areas and have discourse, because although we might see Vermont from the outside as a progressive, as liberal, or as open-minded and educated, and certainly not hateful or bigoted, I think that there are certain people in every society, in every community, that harbor those views, and it's important for us to remind them not only that they're wrong, but that they still have a voice and they can loudly proclaim how wrong they are.
Let's talk but just for a second about that idea that we're at a moment in history. You know, there's a tremendous political backlash going on, pretty much across the political spectrum. The whole Tea Party thing, economics, taxes, unions, but interestingly, you're not seeing that kind of backlash as strongly in the issue of gay and lesbian rights. I mean, the polls are still creeping in the right direction, and a lot of these folks who are sort of involved in this sort of Tea Party style backlash seem to be staying away from the issue. That not to say that the hostility is gone, but do you sense that there really is a change? What is the difference between the progress on this issue now as opposed to, say, in the 90s or the 80s?
The major difference that we have to acknowledge is that gay rights and LGBT equality is not simply a political issue, one that can simply be lobbied and taken polls of. It's not like all of the other things on the docket that gets thrown around for political points, like it used to be. It's being recognized and fully actualized as a full personhood civil rights movement that does not depend solely on political progress for longevity or for truthfulness. The truthfulness of our movement is that when we stand up as gay people, we come out in every single facet of our livelihoods, in our families, in our professions, in the military, in the churches, in the streets. Everywhere we stand up is where progress happens. And no political movement, no political ideology can put a stop to that. They thought they could in early 2000. They thought they could for generations now. But what was most fascinating about our movement in the past 2 years, I would say, particularly after Proposition 8 in California, as well as a lot of the marriage amendments that had happened in the years before that, is that people started to stand up. And others who heard that message recognized this is not just an issue where you can take a poll or we can depend on certain politicians or a certain political party to do our bidding for us. The real work is the work that started off this entire movement, where people stand up and they refuse injustice. That is not only the means to getting legislative equality, it is the ends in and of itself. Standing up against injustice is something we're going to have to continue to do even when all of the books are fully in acknowledgement of our equality. And so this is my message, not only to the students here and everywhere, but also to the entire progressive movement, where people try to label their efforts as simply a political one. It cannot be won through prism of political fighting alone. The battlefield is a much larger one, and it's all-encompassing of life itself. For us, when we talk about environmental issues, or immigration, or healthcare, or fiscal reforms. I think when we have those debates, it's easy to corner them or paint them in a purely political corner, and take polls and say, well, I should fight for this simply because everyone else is doing it. What was most fascinating about these past 2 years is that more and more people stood up. More and more gay people stood up against the injustice. Our people decided that on the streets, we were not just fighting for legislative equality. We used to hear, what do we want? Equal rights. When do we want them? Now. A legislative equality chant, if you will. Nowadays, you're hearing more slogans and rallying cries of, I am somebody. And that's particularly important and poignant to where we are in history, because it really is that somebodiness that we as individuals who are discriminated against are standing up to that injustice. And when we do that, the progress is quick. The progress is accelerated because it's seen as beyond a political fight. And that's what I would recommend to every movement that is fighting to abolish injustice and to create a better world. I think that is one tactic that's used, protesting and standing up. But what's at the heart of it is the achievement of full personhood. I achieved that personally when I came out, and I recognized that it was not an act of demolishing long-held values of honor and integrity and service and selflessness, but it was completing, it was manifesting, it was, in fact, continuing those values and applying them, actualizing them. And when we do recognize that we're not here to destroy or condemn those bedrock values and those principles that have got us to where we are, then we realize that there is nothing quite so threatening about our movement as many people have thought. That people have recognized not only a familiar slogan or a familiar wording, but that the people who are fighting for their rights and for justice deserve it in as fast a way as possible.